There was lots of conversations about what was happening in different parts of the world and that it was coming here.
Someone said, we have 14 days to stop the curve. And I remember thinking at the time, yeah, that's not gonna happen.
I was just seeing all these news stories, which I'd been seeing all week, and I just remember seeing things just shutting down and events canceling.
The art's not happening. The events aren't happening. The whole industry was in shambles. Now what? Now what? What does happen? What do we do next?
It's just that I'm like trying to get lines in my mouth for the wrong episode.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, that should be great. We'll start with that. I'm going to head up to the booth. We'll do a very quick level check.
All right. Otherwise, it will sound a little muffled.
Go ahead, Augusta. Give me some just standard conversation dialogue level, please.
The Hindu scripture Skanda Puranas names the Himalayas as the abode of the gods.
Yeah, I don't want you to get much quieter than that, but when you actually give your lines, you give me that little bit of projection, and we're really spot on. Okay. And your loudest?
Hey, idhar aao. Kya kar rahe ho? Der mat lagao.
Perfect.
We talked about not doing something and just saying, you know what, maybe the company should go into some sort of rest mode. Maybe we can use this time to do some planning, but we won't try to produce any art. You know, we're going to take a break. That definitely came up. But
I was the new artistic director. I wasn't about to come in and break a 30-year legacy of producing theater just because of one little global pandemic. If we are going to have a society, if we're going to pretend like we are still intact as a people, then Book It needs to continue producing because those two things are indivisible from each other.
we felt like the thing we all needed the most when the world was the worst was ways to connect with people and to hear other voices and to be other places. So if we could continue to fulfill our mission in that way and to come to our patrons and our community that way, that felt like exactly what we should be doing.
We did a lot of brainstorming, no wrong answers.
We've had lots of conversations about lots of possibilities and possible outcomes.
Fully produced shows that audiences could watch from home, maybe puppet shows, green screens, computer animation, holograms, all of these things that were certainly out of our wheelhouse, but also perhaps maybe the technology to do them didn't actually exist yet. Especially in the case of holograms.
I recall quite distinctly actually being on one of the early staff meetings during the pandemic and listening to Gus and Katie talk about how the company was going to pivot and that they had a few ideas in mind, such as doing audio dramas, but they weren't necessarily sure about how to accomplish that, what would be needed to do that, or even if it was technologically possible for Book It to do that work. At which point I immediately spoke up and said, well, as a matter of fact, I do have that skill set and I would be happy to share everything I know about it with Book It.
The Hindu scripture Skanda Puranas names the Himalayas as the abode of the gods. All men are affected by their first sight of it, and Mr. Holmes was no exception. His cares and worries seemed, at least momentarily, to have been lifted from his shoulders, as if he had been away on a long voyage and had now finally come home.
Part of deciding to do the entire audio season was we knew that the form would really go with the style that we work in. So the way that we work in the art really lends itself to an auditory experience where your imagination is encouraged. You can really be immersed in worlds.
We have an audience baked in that's used to audiobooks. And doing an audio season isn't that much of a departure. If anything, it's kind of like doing an audiobook on hyperdrive because we're just infusing it with even more luscious storytelling.
So it was finding books that were especially descriptive. It was finding books that were incredibly exciting. All of the titles this season, to some degree or another, are adventures. We wanted to help take people out of their living rooms, out of wherever we've all been stuck at home. Let's give people something that makes it feel like that they can go anywhere.
The process for these audio dramas looks very different. Everything is done remotely, from rehearsals all the way through to recording. And even when we get to recording, we're not bringing the entire cast in at the same time, right? We're only recording with one performer at a time.
Safety was the first discussion that we had. Off the bat, we said, we're not going to rehearse in person. Okay, that means Zoom. Let's get good at Zoom, I guess.
The rehearsal process is both bizarre and uplifting in these pandemic times at the same time.
If we don't do any more rehearsals on Zoom ever again, I won't mind.
As far as the actual project, actual work is concerned, it's an audio play, so we didn't have to worry about costumes and scenic design and lights and things like that, and we were able to focus just on the script, just on the story.
It's very much trying to figure out a way to get everything across while just relying on what you hear. It's theater of the mind.
So for them to simply hear the words and picture it in the grandest possible way, that I think is a benefit of how we're telling this story. There is no competing with the imagination of the audience, and I think people can go all the way to the mountains of Tibet and experience this story.
The other advantage of doing audio productions is we could have people record on their own. So with a pretty isolated process, they only needed to come in contact and very limited physical contact with our audio engineer and the director.
Recording is a very delicate art, and you can tell when two different people are using two different microphones. You can tell when someone records in a slightly larger or smaller room than someone else. And we wanted to make it sound as perfect as possible, as professional as possible. But we knew pretty early on that people would have to record in person and they wouldn't be able to do it from their own home. Now, how they did that was the real challenge.
Before we wanted to invite anyone in the room, we were like, we need to know exactly what we are asking of people and what we are providing for people and setting in place so that they feel and are safe. Using the CDC guidelines, the SAG guidelines, the county state guidelines, they had guidelines from the city. So yoink, all that together, we came up with ours. It's like a list.
Bukit Theater.
And there you go.
Thank you very much.
And your table is lit, so we're happy to have you here. You know the drill.
We are recording one actor at a time. So there is a setup on the stage that has converted the stage to recording booths, and I am in one of them with my own microphone and music stand. And Gus, the director, places himself in the house. And of course, we have Ben in the sound booth where the actual sound engineering is happening. It is simply line by line, take by take, working through the lines of the entire play without other actors, without cues coming in.
3-2A, 3-2B, 3-4A, 3-4C.
The steady rattle of the cart, the clip-clop of hooves.
Our voice actors and our directors and our designers are talented enough and skilled enough that they can come in and give us beautiful work that allows us to build a show that sounds like they were in the room together. And of course they were. They rehearsed together, they practiced it.
And we would ask the actors to sort of take note of where they are, take note of their reaction, and take note of what is prompting that reaction.
What is this moment? What am I doing? What am I saying? And where is this connecting the story to?
Okay, now hold it. Because you're going to come in to record next week and we're going to want to have it there and ready to go.
The steady rattle of the cart, the clip-clop of hooves, the murmur of the distant Ghaggar River.
He's having a good time. The spirit is infectious, so I think that this is just more of a, you know what, you're right. This is great and it's only going to get better. Wait until I show you Shimla.
All right, let's try it. 3-4D.
The steady rattle of the cart, the clip-clop of hooves, the murmur of the distant Ghaggar River, the songs of the doves and barbettes in the shady jamun trees lining the road. With Mr. Holmes's accompaniment, it all combined into a bewitching symphony of nature. It would have moved the feelings of even the most hardened Philistine.
Once the show is recorded, we splice up all the recordings into the individual takes of each line, and then the director will go through. They may have already picked some of their favorites during recording, but if not, they'll listen to all the takes and pick their favorites out.
Post-production is really where it's at. I think that is probably, I'd venture to say that is 70% of the labor.
We spend hours and hours a week on Zoom, live editing the show together, working through notes.
When you consider that there are, say, 6,000 lines in the mandala of Sherlock Holmes, and we're doing maybe about 3 takes for each line, that's 18,000 lines that need to be turned into an audio play.
We then have to work with the director to find the best takes out of all of those.
It's a lot of yay or nay. It's a lot of A or B.
Put those together to create an initial build of the show with no sound effects. Once that's complete, we send that to the director for a first round of notes.
New draft, new notes, new draft, new notes.
And then we start layering in sound effects, vocal effects, and everything else. We'll go through anywhere from 10 to 15 versions of the show from that initial dialogue only build to the final version that we release to the public.
The steady rattle of the cart, the clip-clop of hooves, the murmur of the distant Ghaggar river, the songs of the doves and barbettes in the shady jamun trees lining the road. With Mr. Holmes's accompaniment, it all combined into a bewitching symphony of nature. It would have moved the feelings of even the most hardened Philistine.
The patron response has been great. We've had a lot of really lovely emails and messages from folks.
From every sort of type of person. Everybody can find something for themselves within what we're doing.
There's just something really special about hearing a book adaptation where it's fully cast, it's fully produced, and it's much more like what you might see on stage, but in that fun format that you can take with you anywhere you go, you know?
And a lot of people were like, if I wanted to go with someone in my household, like the cost of tickets would have been prohibitive. But right now, I can buy the entire season and everyone in my home can sit down, cook a meal, and sit around and just listen to a story together.
We've had families who've all bought subscriptions and listened to it all over the country together, which has been a joy and really has encouraged us to think about some of this as evergreen programming.
It has such potential within it that we haven't even begun to tap.
It feels like a way to continue our art and our mission in just another exciting way.
We can't wait to come back. We can't wait to continue doing this. We can't wait to go above and beyond what people might think that we're capable of, because we looked deep within ourselves and saw what was there and what we have to offer.